Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining in to this talk here at Black Hat 2021. I am absolutely honored to be invited to speak here. My story and my history within our community is exciting to me, and hopefully it is to you. We'll move into talking about it, but my title of my talk is "Whoops! I accidentally helped start the hacking branch of a foreign intelligence service." It was really it was a mix up on my part, not really understanding or identifying the threat landscape of what I was walking into, and just like to share that story with you. I've shared it a couple of times over the last couple of years at different B-sides and Wild West Hackfest. And again, thank you so much for the Black Hat community who allowed for me to share my story here. Let's get started. My name is David Evenden. My handle is Jedi Mammoth, and I'm a hacker, a linguist, author, founder, owner. I'm continuously a finder and always a noob. New to the community, as we all are. This right here, what we're going to talk about is, of course, within the history of the Project Raven program that was overseas in the United Arab Emirates, and has been talked about by Chris Being and been on the Jack Rysider show, Darknet Diaries. Again, thank you so much for Jack for having me on as well. So within episode 47, I kind of walk through a lot of this discussion. But again, in this, there's a few other things I'd like to show and like to share. I'm actually going to share everything within the capacity of this, things that I did share at B-Sides Nova that I was not able to take pictures of or share very specifically. But because this is Black Hat and we want to be as granular as we possibly can to the entire community, I'm just going to share everything. So my story starts off within me transitioning out of a linguistics capacity into a hacker for the NSA. When I rotated out of that role, I was offered an opportunity to go overseas with my wife to help coalition forces hunt and fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda operatives in the Middle East. It was a fascinating job, and we did a really awesome, great job for the first couple of months until we rotated into a different area of jurisdiction, hunting and finding money. As you can see, just in case you don't really know where the UAE is, it's just between Saudi and Oman and just north of Yemen. So the role that I was offered was as a targeting or threat hunting analyst within Cyberpoint International. The role was provided to me by a headhunter within the DC area. That everything seemed pretty legitimate, and even the people on the ground that I was interviewing with, of course, all felt the same exact thing. The role and opportunities that we were providing to the area of jurisdiction was all above board, and we all felt very confident in what we were doing. So kind of map this out again, different things that we've talked about over there was while we got on site, we move into that space, and we go to this offsite and I would say a black site location where there's a villa. And the villa is broken up into different capacities where management, security, analysis and research, targeting, and so on and so forth, where they might sit and where they might operate. So this is a good description right here of what the different levels of the villa look like and where we operated at and the teams that we worked in conjunction with. So when we first step into the space initially, our team or our leadership on the ground gave us two different briefings. One, again, the ISIS and Al-Qaeda attack leadership that the ISIS and Al-Qaeda operatives and the threat hunting of those personnel within that region. And then we turn around and give it a completely different one. So again, it's important to understand here that the State Department approval for prior intelligence professionals within the United States have very limited authorities to operate in different capacities for commercial organizations. So the State Department might have given approval to help train in a specific capacity, but not actually performing offensive operations. And then when you get on the ground, in the event that you are performing offensive operations, the local country might put their own classification on what it is that you're doing. And that was what was happening here. So personnel will assist in the development and defense measures of that, that jurisdiction or that area of authority, that theater, if you will. And then again, switching over there for Project Dread, really doing offensive operations in conjunction with NISA, which is the UAE's NSA, basically similar to the NSA. All technical offensive operations and technical and SIGINT collection happens through NISA. So this sort of steps into starting this process of what we were doing to track and hunt ISIS. What we're going to do is we'll walk through this particular conversation and then how it moved into a significantly more dreadful operation that multiple analysts on the ground decided to step back away from. We'll get there. So again, in 1 year, the 7 wars of the Muslim countries, kind of looking at what the ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Taliban leadership and operations within the area of jurisdiction, what they were doing and how they were operating in different areas. At that particular time, our main focus was the operations that were happening in Iraq, and as operatives moved out of Iraq into different countries and took over different FOBs, forward operating bases in that region, and allowing for us to provide intelligence back to different leadership that might be able to provide assistance overcoming those different attack vectors. So most of the tracking that was taking place, because of the nature of the way ISIS communicated, was from their feeds at the time. Again, this is 2014, 2015, 2016, and how they communicated over Twitter handles, different utilization of keywords that would initiate or drive different operations in the region. And while we were doing a lot of this work, the same work and research was being performed by RAND back in the United States. So we used different Twitter applications and collectively utilized Twitter API to pull information and perform holistic analysis against the different keywords, different handles, usernames, the way the usernames were designed, and where different handles were created and initiated from. So again, chatter, cross correlations, if you see different keywords used in different areas of operation, if you see them used over and over again, and then computational deltas. So if you do see different types of patterns performed over a series of time and then those drop, and then you see very similar types of patterns associated with maybe like keywords that are similar to other keywords, you can begin to see different types of pattern used within chatter online, and then computational deltas of those chatters over periods of time. Pardon me. And so, again, moving back to like keyword analytics, being able to perform, really, it's not, you're not moving into artificial intelligence. I would even say you're not even moving into machine learning at that time. It's really just data science against what is the data that's being pulled down from different handles and different keywords across associated personnel for known associated personnel. At the time, we were operating under the OVSC 1203 collection of known targets, and that would be 2 persons away from a known active target. So if you know somebody's an active target, and you can collect on people that they communicate with, and then you can also collect on people that those first hops communicate with, but not necessarily being able to collect on the associates of that third level. But you can collect on the activity that they're doing, just not on the activity of outside boundaries. Because we're not performing in that capacity the offensive operation of collecting on that, we're able to pull down information that might just be on Twitter or over the web. But in the event that you gain access to that infrastructure, you're pulling information down, you can't do that outside those two lanes. And then I think at that time, 2014, 15, 16, Barack Obama changed that regulation from 3 persons, 3-person circle to a 2-person circle. And so that was a significant change in the ability to collect on known targets. Again, different types of activity that was going over a period of time. This right here really is between 2012 and 2013, moving into 2015 for North Sniper conviction that happened on May 18th. But as you can kind of see, like different types of people and different handles within the jurisdiction of the UAE and where they might be, and correlations between them and other people that are known targets. And so as we kind of move into this space, some of the other questions we're starting to get are personnel that are raising significant awareness to activities that might be happening in the UAE, and Rory Donahue was one of those people, and he's actually a journalist out of the UK, but the way that it was painted as a picture for us on the ground was that he was an activist that was a national security threat in the UAE. and it was painted a very specific picture that he might be funneling different types of information to different organizations that might provide a security threat associated with ISIS in that region. Of course, after a long period of time and different research and multiple other stories, including Chris Being and other people, it just became clear that this was just absolutely made up. But as you can see, the Stealth Falcon, which is what was known within that capacity, eventually turned over to Project Raven. But fake personas that were used in order to target Rory, and then those particular targets and how they were pushed out and how they were perceived to him in order to deliver different types of content that would take over his machine and collect information. In reality, at the end of the time, what we ended up learning was that Rory's main focus was a human rights activist to talk about the injustices that were happening in the UAE. So it's very important to understand that intelligence professionals coming out of different regions going to help other foreign intelligence countries might be manipulated to perform different offensive operations against somebody that other country perceived as a threat for a different purpose other than why those intelligence professionals and offensive security professionals or offensive intelligence professionals might be there to perform actions against. So we were there to perform actions against ISIS and Al-Qaeda operatives, and then other tasking came down against people who don't fit into that category. So just an important sort of lesson to keep your eyes open that things might be spun differently to force you or allow for you to move into an area of jurisdiction that you don't have, one, the authority to be there, but two, you wouldn't want to be there in the first place anyways. If you have, that level of understanding that that's not somebody that really deserves to be targeted just because they're raising awareness to human rights injustices within a region, let them write about it. The targeting of journalists for the sake of quieting them is something that has been, it's been frowned upon. It's against the law in a lot of countries, and it is something that needs to be protected across different capacities and different justice groups. So this is an example of one of the emails that might have been sent to Rory. I pulled this off of a website that kind of outlined that from the Stealth Falcon, and I have a list of references at the bottom of this slide deck, so you can pull the different references and do some own research. You can pause it there and pull that information if you want to. So again, just kind of talking about and forming into discussing here the human rights in the Middle East. So after this sort of got pushed out, became aware that was really what his goal was, and that entire concept or subject matter was used against him to get him to open something or click on something that would then download something within his computer. So you can see you just make up something that looks like it's a macro protected document, and all you have to do is just tell them you have to go enable macros. Once you enable those macros, it downloads, and we all know that process. Download something, and you get a call back from that machine. His particular machine was a Mac OS, so the different exploit that was targeted against him to be able to run that exploit and gain persistence on that machine, of course, was very specifically crafted and purchased from different exploit brokers and targeted against Rory. So again, fight for the right to fight. So again, using different concepts and subject matters very specifically to his, I would say his desires to produce, spoken, rather to speak specifically to the injustices happening in that region. So after we kind of started to move in this space and started to ask a little bit of other questions, we began also to get different questions about following the money. Now, this is very normal. This is a very normal question. Hey, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, how are they operating? Is a Muslim Brotherhood funneling the money? If so, how is that happening, and can you prove it? So we were asked, can you prove that this is actually happening? We said, well, do you have a key, or do you have an idea of what might be happening? And of course, they came back to us and said, well, we feel like that it might be the country of Qatar. Can you gain access to the country of Qatar and identify a way whether or not they're funneling money to the Muslim Brotherhood? So again, it was brought back to us: Qatar, Saudi, Iran, and Yemen. There was different, whether or not it be the Houthis, or the ISIS, Al Qaeda, Mujahideen, whatever it might have been, but terrorist organization within that region was the main focus of identifying how that money was being funneled to them. They all became targets, And then we sent a request back and said, we need permission from the State Department in order to perform these actions. Can we do this? And so as we went from there, we got that permission back, and then we moved forward in that conversation in order to say, let's begin to target. Qatar was our first one, and for the first time, I'm actually going to walk through the exploitation life cycle of how the country of the UAE gained access to the country of Qatar. So what initially happened was it was a full wall and scan, and within HHO, we identified a VPN infrastructure for HHO that gave us access to that infrastructure. Within the infrastructure, MISA had stood up a Managed Engine Service Desk Plus platform that had a default administrator login. So we were tunneling through our HHO access into a private IP address that had shared infrastructure between HHO and MISA just for scanning. We gained access to that Managed Engine Service Desk Plus machine, routed through that platform, dumped the database on there, and then used the JavaScript code that was used to encrypt the passwords in that database, reverse that process, and then decrypt the passwords in that database in order to print them out in plain text. What we ended up finding was that not only was this Managed Engine Plus machine designed as a test bed to scan this infrastructure, it was also designed to scan a bunch of other different different networks within the authorities of MISA as it pertained to them being a state-sponsored MSP. And so from there, we were able to tunnel through MISA, gain a bunch of other infrastructure, gain access to Amiri Flight, gain access to Manai, MOFA, Qatari Foundation, and MOI. So it was a pretty significant access that it obtained, and it allowed for us to gain access to pretty much every military and government entity within the country of Qatar. There was different area of jurisdiction within different countries. They wanted access to this, they wanted access to that, and the whole entire goal was to, in that capacity, was to gain access to MOI. So it was assumed that the Ministry of Interior, if there was money being funneled out of the country, was happening through there. And then in other countries, it might have been like nuclear research that might have been happening against, within the country of Iran. So targeting different university researchers and so on and so forth was our main area of jurisdiction. So Intel requests at that point in the country of Qatar started deviating from our mission plan. They wanted flight patterns for the Qatari royal family and so on and so forth. And those became, kind of suspicious. So as we started asking more and more questions, that's when the initial deviation started between, or when the exit strategy began to get put into play for moving away from Cyberpoint as a contracting agent, and then moved into Dark Matter. And so Dark Matter, you go to their website, you take a look. They are a state-sponsored organization for the country of the UAE to perform actions against foreign intelligence organizations apart from the UAE. They are just an offensive intelligence shop, whether or not it be intelligence gathering, intelligence collection, offensive operations, research, exploitation, development, so on and so forth. It's been a while since I've done my own research against this organization, but from what I understand, they're not the primary organization doing this. It's been broken up into a bunch of different groups now. So if you still are interested in doing that research, there's a bunch of different people that you can talk to, even within the values of the United States, that are continuing to do that research. You might be able to ask them different questions. But for instance, you go to this site and you take a look at it. There's no links. If they're a commercial organization, you would expect to see some type of way to hire them for their business, a way to perform different actions, but there's nothing on their website to be able to reach out to them. So that's a pretty significant indicator that an organization may not be legitimate. So again, Dark Matter and departures. When Raven was created in 2009, Abu Dhabi had little cyber expertise. And over the course of 5 to 10 years, MRI intelligence officers were skilled enough to take over documents shown. And in 2013, the UAE really went into and hired Cyberpoint in order to bring them over to the UAE in order to perform those operations. In late 2015, the power dynamic of the villa shifted as UAE grew more uncomfortable with the core national security program being controlled by foreigners. So we kept telling them, no, we can't do that. If you see an ISIS or Al-Qaeda personnel move into the country of the United States, we can't track them, we can't follow them. If they use a piece of infrastructure that is within the boundaries of the United States, we don't have permission to gain access to that. So it was some of the stuff was really slowed down, and that was one of the main I would say driving forces to move away from using U.S. sponsored personnel and contracting organizations. So we were really told either you're joining here or you're leaving. Obviously, people who are loyal to the United States are not going to do that. So we jumped ship and came back to the U.S. So some of the lessons learned in my capacity would be, if it's too good to be true, if you're giving too much money, if you're going to a different spot, everything seems to be wonderful and perfect, it's too good to be true. Vet your leadership. That was one of the main things that I learned out of this. I did some research on the leadership on the ground there, and they came back and said, yes, they're known, they're aware of them. I should have dug more deeper into that, because after I left, I asked even more questions into that. And of course, there were stories that came out of that that I should have been aware of or cognizant to. If you move to a foreign country and they take your passport for any period of time other than 24 hours, that should be pretty significant and it should worry you a lot. Always ask for printed and signed documentation of your authorities to perform operations, especially if those authorities are signed by the State Department, so you can vet to make sure that you actually have permissions to be doing to be doing that work. As in, you're doing construction work, you're building something out, you measure twice, you cut once. I've really learned, ask twice, hack once. Make sure that you're hacking the right targets, make sure you have permission to be doing that. Remember your training, that's really important too. If you get those hairs standing up on your arms, you start to feel really uncomfortable, you need to step back and say, my spidey sense is going off here, I need to change what I'm doing. Have an exit strategy. If you move overseas to work overseas and you don't have an exit strategy, you don't have a plan to get out of there, that's a pretty important part of this process. Whether or not your organization that you're working with provides you an exit strategy, you also need one yourself. It's always important. Family is your most important asset. If you move over somewhere else by yourself and is your intent to live there long term, awesome, that's great. If you move over somewhere else with a family, make sure that you know what to expect when you get there. What's going to happen the first 2 weeks is 60 days. And if you're going to have enough food, if you're going to have enough money, and if you don't have enough money, what is your backup plan in the event that you don't? It's really important. It was a really good lessons learned for our family. Again, here's our citations. And if you have any questions and you're in person here, that's great. I'm happy to answer any questions. Come up and meet me and talk to me. If you're online, my handle is Jedi Mammoth, as you can see here. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Thank you so much. And again, to Black Hat community, thank you for listening to this story. Hopefully it's helpful. Hopefully you learned a few things in the event that you rotate out of the intelligence community in the United States or anywhere else, any other country, and you want to go work somewhere and you're wondering about whether or not it's a good idea. Take some lessons from me and take notes. Know that where you're going to go work, what jobs you're going to be doing, who's your leadership on the ground, and are they a vetted resource. Thank you so much again. Bye.